I wasn't sure how many grandkids or anything like that. So.
You related to Wayne?
Yes, sir. All three of us.
Oh, really? Y'all son?
Me and him are sons, and that's the nephew.
Oh,
Wayne.
years ago, Wayne's my brother was good friends.
Yeah.
Sonny Pryor
Oh, yeah. Yes, and you can sign.
and Wendell.
Yeah.
My memories of Wendell, we lived with him. Sonny was there. Passion. Wendell had invented some kind of food statement.
Yes, that's my.
No. He can go get an old TV out of the junkyard today, you know, make something else. Yeah.
I just remember that stove. I don't know what town.
So it's nice, nice to meet you.
I'm Don.
I'm Jeff.
Yeah.
And this is my brother Keith. I'm Keith. Yeah, that's nice to meet you.
So it's like works here.
Uh-huh.
No,
I want to thank you all for coming. Joy Ann Pierce Blanton was born on March 3rd, 1940, to Robert and Susie Pierce in Childress, Texas. Ann was their fourth child. When Ann was 18 months old, the family moved to Detroit, Texas, where the family started their lives running a farm. As a little girl, Ann had a knack for getting into all sorts of trouble. One story we've been told is when she was about 4 and nobody could find her shoes. Everybody in the family was looking for them. The shoes were never found. What her mother did find was shoe buckles in the wood stove. When Ann was about 8, she started helping in the hayfield. She started out steering the truck as her brothers and other hay hands threw and stacked hay bales onto the trailer. She did different jobs over the years, but spent most of her time raking hay into windrows. She always loved school, especially high school. She was friends with most, if not all, of her classmates. She apparently didn't outgrow her knack for getting into trouble and had her fair share of adventures in high school. Detroit High School was probably really glad to see the class of 1958 graduate. After graduation, she moved to Dallas and attended Drawn Business School for a year or so, still maintaining close ties with her family, coming home for frequent visits. Remember those hay hands I mentioned? Turns out one of them was still around, and on one of her visits home in December, he asked Ann and her sister Jean if they would like to go bowling. They did. Ann must have bowled the best game in history because she married that hay hand, Wayne Blanton, the next Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1960. When Ann and Wayne first got married, they lived in Austin, Texas, where they had 3 children: Susan Elizabeth, always called Beth, Joy Lynn, and Jeffrey Wayne. In 1964, they moved to Blanton, Texas, where their 4th child, Michael Keith, was born. With 4 small children to take care of, she had plenty to do to keep her busy. In 1968, Wayne, Ann, and all those children moved back to Detroit. Ann became an active member of the community. She was very involved with the PTA and for many years was instrumental in organizing the annual Harvest Festival. Her specialty with White Flower South was the cakewalk. Not only did she run the game, but when one of her cakes was the prize, the circle was always full. She was also a lifelong member of the First Christian Church. She taught Sunday school and played the piano for more than 40 years. She worked as a medical transcriptionist for nearly 30 years at Blanton Hospital in Paris. In December 1975, Wayne and Ann came full circle and moved into a new home built for them on the same land where she grew up and Wayne worked for so many years. After Wayne's death in 1998, Ann continued to live there and was the center of the family. She was always willing to host for holidays, especially Thanksgiving, and never failed to welcome children, grandchildren, in-laws, and outlaws, as well as any friends who might show up. Joy Ann Pierce Blanton passed away on July 20th, 2026. She was 86 years, 4 months, and 17 days old. She is survived by her sister, Jean Pierce of Austin, Texas, daughter Joy Jobe and husband Danny of Clayton, North Carolina, son Jeff Blanton and wife Della of Detroit, Texas, and son Keith and Melanie Blanton of Clifton, Texas. She had 13 grandchildren, 22 great-grandchildren and counting. She is also survived by many loved nieces and nephews. She was preceded by 3 brothers, Ray Pierce of Dallas, Texas, Jack Pierce, Lockhart, Texas, and Alan J. Pierce, who died as an infant. Also preceding her were her parents, Robert and Susie Pierce, her daughter, Beth Alserbrook, Beth's husband, Bruce, and Ann's husband, 38 years, Wayne Blanton. Thank you.
I guess I get to say now it's my turn. You know, whenever we were talking about it, I never did say that I wanted to do Mama's funeral. But on the other hand, I guess I always assumed that I would be part of it. And I think Keith thought the same way. We did Daddy's funeral. And so I guess we both just kind of assumed that we'd do it. And then we were there at the house working on stuff, and Joy, she had more or less wrote the obituary, and we were talking, me and Keith were talking about it, and Joy spoke up and she said, I would really like to read the obituary. And I'm like, really? It's the obituary. And she did. So I know it was important to her. Mother was born in 1940. This was a time when songs like Over the Rainbow with Judy Garland was being sung. It was the beginning, or right close to the beginning of World War II. I think World War II actually started in 1939 is when it started, but it was right at the beginning of World War II. And so she started out at a time of life when there were a lot of things happening. She was a vibrant person, one of the who literally lit up a room whenever she walked into it. And, you know, my daddy would have been the first to tell you from his perspective that when Mama walked in a room, it was the highlight of somebody coming in the room. He was in love with Mother so much. And it was an important thing because of how much he loved her. Mother was brought up with traditional values. She learned the skills that women of her era learned, such as cooking, sewing, taking care of the house, taking care of the family. And I think to some degree that's just kind of gone by the wayside in the era that women are being brought up now. But I think it was a good era whenever Mother was brought up. And Mother did a wonderful job of taking care of the family and making sure that the family had everything that they needed. Mother taught us a lot as young kids and taught us how to hold to the role that each of her kids live today because of what she taught us. Our manners, our respect, our moral values. She taught us all these things, and these values have made me and Keith and Joy and even the extended family to some degree. It has made us all what we are today and how we live our lives. The family that we grew up in with 4 kids, we didn't have a lot of money. When Mother and Daddy moved back in '68, Daddy built the gas station there in Detroit and ran it. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we were always fed. We always were well dressed. Mother spent hours sewing, making outfits for us to wear, mostly for Joy and Beth. She would sew for them, but there was one time she decided that she needed to make us me and Keith some suits, and she made us I don't know what they were made out of, but they were stiff as all get out. And she spent hours working on those things, putting those white pearl snaps on them. And I don't know how long it took her to make them, but by the time she got through with them and we were supposed to wear them, we were too big for them. But we wore them anyway. You know, she spent all that time, we had to wear them. And you know, it's funny what she did to take care of the family, but she worked constantly doing it. She was the mother of 4 boisterous children, Beth, Joy, myself, and Keith. And, you know, Mother had a hard time juggling the demands of all 4 of us. I can remember times, and other people, I see some out here in the group this afternoon that are here, that their parents had the same problems, but, you know, Beth and Joy were just a little bit older, not much, than me and Keith. And Mother would have to take the girls one place, and then she'd have to take me and Keith somewhere else, and then she'd have to go back and get the girls, pick them up from school, and then come back and pick us up. And she was juggling things like that all the time. Art Miller, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And Mother never complained. I never heard Mother gripe about the fact that she had so many demands on her. She was always willing to do whatever she needed to. And she always was willing to have people come over to the house. With 4 of us kids, there was always somebody that had somebody come over. And Mama opened the door and would let anybody come in. But Mama also would tell them if they were doing something she didn't like, that they could quit too. Bobby Motley, that guy, boy, I love him to death. But Bobby Motley, he'd come to the house, and the first thing he'd do is he'd pick up a glass of ice and chunk a piece of ice in his mouth and go to chewing it. Mama told him one time, she asked him, she said, sitting there at the table, we had been eating, and she said, Bobby, are you ready to go home? And he hadn't been there long. Bobby looked at Mama like he thought he had done something wrong, and he said, no. He said, not really. She said, well, then you better quit chewing ice or you're fixing to go home. And she meant it too. She had seen him home. She didn't want him chewing the ice. She had let anybody come in, but she wanted her rules followed. And you followed her rules. Mother had an inherent love for music. One of the things that I remember that she liked was Elvis Presley. She liked Elvis Presley. She worked at Baker and Taylor for a period of time, and whenever Baker and Taylor started to close down, they were selling all kinds of books, and Mother was an avid reader. She read all the time, and she found some poster books, is what I call them. They were about 18, 20 inches tall, and on every page it was just a poster of Elvis Presley. And she wanted those Elvis Presley books because she liked Elvis Presley. And whenever she got through, got passed away here the other day, we were looking at different things, and I thought about those books, and I ain't found them yet. I wish I knew where they were, but I hadn't found those books yet. Maybe one day we'll find them. Joy talked about Thanksgiving, how that Mother was big on having a big Thanksgiving get-together. I remember Christmas. Christmas was a big deal. Jimmy and David and their family, Uncle Harold and Daddy's brothers and grandmother, they would come out to the house. Grandmother and granddaddy on Mother's side of the family would come down, and we always had a great big huge Christmas. And I remember the Christmases and Mother and grandmother and others being in the kitchen preparing for Christmas dinner or whatever we were going to have, and just the feeling of all of us being together, our family, her family, Dad's family, and us all being together, and Mother and Daddy's home, the hub of it. And Mother enjoyed that. I really think Daddy enjoyed it more. I think sometimes Mama just put up with it because Daddy wanted to do it. But we always had to get together. And as adults, she became very important to me in many ways. She was my advisor. She was my confidant. She was you might say a friend. Her greatest quality was the ability to encourage me and others to be able to be the best at whatever we can be. And if you have problems, overcome and go on. Don't let it bring you down. She was a proud lady. She believed that there was no obstacle that she couldn't overcome. There's a lot of obstacles that she did overcome in her life, and I think it's because she knew that she could. Mom and Dad talked about traveling. Whenever they, quote, retired, they talked about traveling, wanting to explore different parts of the country. At one point in time, they said that Daddy was going to buy him a truck and start driving the truck. Mom was going to ride with him, and all they were doing was going to travel across the United States. Never did happen. They did do some traveling, though. Joy and Danny lived all up and down the eastern seaboard, and it seemed like about every other year they were moving somewhere, and Mom and Daddy would go to wherever they were living at the time, and they enjoyed that. But that was short-lived. Daddy got sick and passed away, and so their traveling days were short-lived. But the days that they did travel, they really, really enjoyed it. After I got married, and I moved out of the house, at least in my mind, I would go back to see both, mom and dad before dad passed away. She always seemed to stay busy, taking care of the family and doing whatever. And then whenever daddy passed away, I was fortunate enough to be able to move into the house that she was raised in. That they moved into when they came from West Texas back home. And we still live there, and we were fortunate enough to be right next door to mother and to be able to help her after daddy had passed away. And I know the other kids would come in and do things too, but we lived right there next door, and it was very important. Mother always tried to help others. At one point in time, I think there were 7, maybe 8 family members, mother's mom and daddy, daddy's daddy, aunts, that were in the nursing home, and mama took care of all of those one time, going to the nursing home, seeing them. And so she always was willing to help. She was raised in the small town of Detroit, where she had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and only the 1 sister is still living. And that's Aunt Jean. And we're trying to live stream this for Aunt Jean. And she's not able to be here. And some of the other family out there, phones that are doing this room, so that they can record it for Aunt Jean. But Aunt Jean really wanted to be here, but she just wasn't able to. And so after mother went into the nursing home, Aunt Jean had written mother a note. And I want to read that note that mother got from her sister. It says, "Dear Aunt, you have been on my mind a lot and in my prayers. It seems so very strange that we are not able to visit one another or even chat on the phone. It has been interesting and even frustrating how memories are coming back, fascinating how memories are coming back to me. One memory that came back to me was the work you did for people in the medical field. I was so impressed with how you learned and could use medical terms as you did your work. It seemed like you were good at what you did and enjoyed doing it. And remembering those years reminded me that you started out being good. You started out being good at what you did. I am thinking about when you went to work baling hay and working with cattle for Daddy. Hot, heavy, dirty work. Daddy would say, 'She's probably my best hand.' To get complimented like that from our dad was like 1 in 1,000. Then I started thinking about the beautiful Christmas balls you made for me. I proudly display them every year during Christmas season, and I get so many compliments from others admiring me. I wonder if you were too young to remember going to school with me." Now, y'all want to talk about back then, they wouldn't let them do this today, no matter what. But she said, "I wonder if you remember going to school with me when you were too young to start school yourself. Sometimes mother would let you go with me, and the teachers were okay with that. Isn't it amazing? Well, they wouldn't do that today. You know, if you're not in school, you don't need to be there. But anyway, well, I'll stop with that. Just know you are on my mind, in my heart, and loved by me. Can you believe we are this old?" You know, I have some lasting memories of Mom, and those lasting memories are really some very simple memories. A hard-working, passionate, strong person who always was willing to support the family, and she always kept soldiering on. She never gave up, and I think about Mother that way. It was my pleasure to be able to move back home, following Daddy passing away, and being able to live next door to her and to be able to take care of her. And during this last 4 or 5 months that she's been in the nursing home, being able to be there on nearly a daily basis, it's a privilege, and I'm thankful for being able to do that. She was a wonderful woman. She's been a support, a strength, a comfort to the family. I don't know personally how I'm going to cope with her being gone, but You know, I felt the same way when Daddy passed away in '98. And you just keep on keeping on. You do what has to be done. You can't give up. And so I know it's going to be okay. Everything will be fine. But it does leave kind of a massive hole in my heart with Mama being gone. But I want to draw strength for myself and hopefully for the rest of the family from a phrase that has been quoted many times. And that phrase is, accept the things you cannot change and change the things you can. We can't change what has happened. Part of life is death. And so we can't change that. The book of Hebrews teaches us that. And so we can't change that, but there are things we can change. And we can do the things that we ought to do. And so let's remember that and use that as a strength for us as we go forward. If I was to say so, I always walked up while Mom was in the nursing home, and whenever I would see her, I'd say, "How's my mom?" Well, I love my mom. And she's going to be missed more than words can say. But I do miss her. I want to close with the reading of a psalm. And the psalm is a psalm of compassion, you might say. It's Psalm 34, and there's 22 verses, and I know Keith still got to get up and give his speech, so I'm not going to read the whole psalm, but I am going to say a few things about it. It's a psalm of comfort, and it's a psalm that I'm bringing about because to comfort the family is what this is. In the first 6 verses, it talks about prayer and having our prayers answered. And then in verse 7 and in verse 8, it speaks of God's protection, how He can protect us. Verse 9 tells us that we need to fear the Lord. And then verse 10 teaches us how God takes care of you and me. If we'll just turn to God, He'll take care of us. Verse 11 down through verse 13 actually deals with what you might call the good life. Verses 17 down through verse 20 talks about being delivered from evil and from trouble and the things that are going to come our way in this life. And we need to think about that. And then lastly, in verse 22, it talks about what it means for us to have someone to be there for us when it says, "The Lord redeemeth the soul of His servants, and none of him that trust in Him shall be desolate." I'm going to miss Mother immensely, but it is an honor to be able to stand before you and to share some of my memories concerning my mom. And she's going to be missed by all. Some more than others, I think maybe because she was she had cohorts in crime when she was growing up. One of them's here, June Robertson. I'm just going to call her out. Mother was in high school, I guess, and they were going to go. The police at Clarksville had told everybody in all the schools, don't be soaping the windows at Clarksville on the square. With Mama and June and 2 or 3 others, they decided, they ain't gonna do nothing. So they run down to Clarksville and they soap the windows down there on the street. And they get caught by the police. Mama told my granddaddy, if you get caught, don't call me because I'll leave you in jail. But they got caught. And the police officer was nicer than what Granddaddy thought he should have been. Granddaddy thought they should have just been put in jail. But they had to drain the water out of the radiator of the car, and the boys took their shirts off so they could clean the windows there on the square at Clarksville so that they could leave and go home. Whenever they left to go home, they didn't make it home because the car overheated. Didn't have any water. And so, like Joy read in her obituary, they probably were glad in the class of 58 graduated high school because there's a lot of things that they did. But Mother will be missed, and we loved her very dearly.
I'll it was still and all it seems somehow all along the sun is slow.
Definitely not traditional to be used at a funeral service. May seem a bit odd at first. It comes toward the end of the Gospel of John. That's when the apostle had given his account of the life and the work of Jesus. In chapter 21, verse 25 of that gospel, he says, "And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself couldn't contain the books that would be written." Whether or not the writer was trying to quantify the amount of wisdom that Jesus gave is not really relevant. I think at the very least he was saying that he did not have the time, the space, or the ability to convey the importance or the impact that Jesus had while on earth. Similarly, I'm going to begin today by already admitting defeat. That is, if what I'm supposed to do here is to convey the impact that my mom had in this world and on the other side of the earth, I don't have the ability to do it or the time, the space. It's not happening. Honestly, I don't even have the inclination to make an attempt to provide comfort in our grieving. What I can do is offer a suggestion to you that would be a path forward where you can find comfort and peace from our Creator. I suppose it's a bit counterintuitive to talk with intentional focus about what you have lost in order to feel peace about that loss. But that's exactly what I am suggesting we do. The more we talk about Mom and focus on her, the more we embrace her enduring impact and walk in blessing rather than in grief. Hopefully I can say something today that will remind you of your own blessing and your own story to share. Your discussions will be the pathway to healing and peace. To that end, I want to share a few thoughts, not intended to be sufficient, but simply to stir up your own memories and kickstart conversations. I think my mother would be okay with it if we talked about her and memories and stuff for the rest of the day, week, month, however long. To that end, I want to share with you something I call sometimes, always. You see, the early part of Mother's life, I have no direct knowledge, of course, because I'm her son. I don't remember how old she was when I was born. I don't know. Y'all can discuss that. But I have no direct knowledge of that. What I do know is some of the things that we've heard, and you've heard some stories about the shoes in the fire, and Jeff's talked windows and stuff. I knew that story too, but had forgotten it. That's kind of what the point is, isn't it? If we'll bring those things up and kickstart your memory, so to speak. The story that I have, or a story that I have, that actually my grandmother gave me. Jeff mentioned the house where they lived. It's about 2 miles outside of town. Grandmother and granddaddy had one vehicle. It was a pickup that he used for work. And if grandmother needed supplies or anything from the store in town, they had to walk to town to get them. Again, 2 miles. Apparently mother complained and whined and said, "That's too far. I cannot walk that far." So grandmother, displaying a fair amount of wisdom, gave her a stick horse. And mother could ride that stick horse to town. She could run around grandmother as she did, zigzag the road, up and down, run ahead, come back. She could do all this. She probably rode that stick horse 3.5 miles on a 2-mile walk. But she was sometimes just a child. Sometimes she was just a young lady, and what I have written, and this is the danger of being third, other people may use your stories. And actually you helped me this time, Jeff, because I was going to mention some names of people that she grew up with, and I've decided not to do it because I knew I would inevitably leave somebody out, or, what could be possible is I just remember hearing a name, and I'll say that name is her friend. It was somebody she didn't like or something like that. So I didn't want to take the chance on that, but I know Jeff said June is here. I don't see her wherever June is. But she was, to the best of my understanding and recollection, and you can confirm this, she has one lifelong friend here. You can confirm. I think my mother was a pretty popular girl when she was young. She loved to dance, I know. She, especially the jitterbug. I think is an old dance, I don't know. She tried to teach me, I refused to learn. We were at an event in Clifton when she came to visit, and she wanted to dance, and she wanted to do the jitterbug, and I said, no. She said, "But I'm your mother," and I said, "I'm aware of that, no." But Lee Berger hopped up and danced with her. He expressed regret earlier that he lost his dance partner. Sorry for that. So sometimes she was a child. Sometimes mom was a philosopher. As a night owl, she didn't really get going good until after 10 o'clock at night. And she started a lot of conversations that later, even later, and my memory of that is that she would start those conversations oftentimes with the phrase, "What do you think about?" And then she would say something. They're not here. I remember one time she asked me, "What do you think about Ray and Angie?" My cousin and his wife. And, she could analyze with the best of them. I think she would ask me my opinion or ask someone else their opinion so that she could then discuss whatever they said. And I swear sometimes she asked first because she wanted to get, the opinion out there so she could take the opposite side, just to extend the conversation. I'm not sure of that at all. One of the most philosophical things that she ever said, she told me herself, this is a story she told me herself, and I don't know the event. It was something probably at school, some function for her kids or whatever, but there was a group of mothers that were gathered in this little group, and my mother was there, but not really participating in the group. And what this group was doing is they were longing for those times in the past. When did you enjoy your children the most? And somebody said, oh, I loved it when my children were 2 years old, or I loved it when they were this age, or whatever. And the conversation continued until finally one of them, they all expressed their opinion, except for Mother. And somebody asked her, they said, well, Ann, what was your favorite time to be a mother? What was your favorite time or favorite age for your kids? And she said, what I have learned is to always embrace the moment that you are in. And I truly have enjoyed my children the most at whatever stage of life they are in right then. She is the only woman that I have ever heard say this. There may be others, but she said at one point in time, I loved being pregnant. If I could be pregnant all my life, that would be fine. I loved being pregnant. So sometimes she's a little crazy. Apparently. But when we were babies, she loved having babies. When each of her children were about 2, she just loved having 2-year-olds, and you can see how this goes, to the point that my mom loved even having adult children. That must have been her favorite, because that's the longest age that any of us have. Sometimes my mother was flashy. Not in the raincoat sort of way. Vibrant, they say. I choose the word flashy. You'll notice that many of those of us here in her family, we're not wearing, well, I've got a dark suit, so that might be a bad example, but, we're not, somebody asked, one of my daughters asked my wife, should we wear black? Absolutely not. Wear something vibrant. Wear something that more representative of her personality. And all of the granddaughters, and I think great-granddaughters, and I don't know of any of the grandsons, but they are wearing Mother's earrings today. And they are flashy. They are long, they are colorful, they are all these things. These are all things indicative of her personality. One time she was at another event for her children. It was a play, and I don't remember who was in the play. I don't know if it was Joy or Beth, or it could have even been one of their friends. Again, I don't need to know the details. Those are good things for discussion later. But one of the characters in the play was to be decked out in jewelry, and Mom put everything that she owned on that person, whoever it was, all kinds of jewelry, rings with big stones and everything. She was sitting next to someone in the audience, and this character walks out adorned in all this jewelry, and that person leaned over to Mother and said, my gosh, have you ever seen such gaudy jewelry? Mother leaned back over and said, every piece that she's wearing belongs to me. True story. She was sometimes flashy, so much so that at least one set of her grandchildren, and I'm sure this is common, I mean, grandchildren make up different names for their grandparents, but my children, they don't call her grandmother, they don't call her grandma, granny, or they call her Diva G-Ma. Because sometimes she was flashy. Sometimes she was a singer. One of my greatest and most treasured memories go a long way back. I remember, and you're not gonna believe this, because she's looked frail for many years, and you can see what I look like now, but there was a time when I was small enough and she was strong enough to hold me and rock me in a rocking chair, and she would sing to me. I'm sure this happened with my brother and my sisters, though at the time I didn't care about their experience. I only cared about mine, but she would sing songs that would teach life values. I think the favorite that I have, and I hope somebody can remember all of this song. I'm not sure I could get it all, but it was my favorite at the time, and still, the lesson still sticks with me. The very last part of the song says, "The moral, dear children, is never to lie, never to lie, never to lie. The moral, dear children, is never to lie, or you will sizzle and fry." And I don't want to try to claim that I've never lied, but I try not to her, for sure. She would sing little silly little songs that were just funny, and I don't know any of those to recite to you, but one of my daughters does, and so that is something you can discuss later on. In fact, where I don't see her, where Rebecca is, there she are. If you'll want to ask her to sing that song later on, I'm sure she will. It's quite amusing, but mother was very engaging with everybody, with her children, with her grandchildren. Silly little songs. She liked to sing hymns, and she played the piano, as Joy mentioned, for nearly 40 years in her church. All of her children, all four of us really, as young people, and some of us have not overcome this yet, but we had drug problems as children. She drug us to church every Sunday. There was no getting out of it. One of the most endearing memories that I have is her singing "In the Garden," the song you just heard played before I came up. And the reason, I've got to confess, somebody said we need to pick one more song to go about. I'll take care of it. I picked the song because I remember her playing that song in church. I remember her soprano voice that just rang out, and how beautiful it was. She used that singing sometimes to entertain. There was in Detroit at the time, I don't know what's there now, I had moved away and been gone so long, but at the time, there was an annual homecoming celebration around the 4th of July. I remember one year in particular that Mother and my sisters, Joy and Beth, were a featured entertainment at one of those homecoming events. In fact, if you saw it, there was a picture, I think Mother was wearing a dress. It was a blue, I want to say gingham, is that the right word? Blue gingham dress. Joy and Beth each had a gingham dress also. Theirs, again, don't fight me on the details here. I think one of them was green and the other one pink or yellow. Those three, I don't know what colors. Pink and yellow, okay. And they sang and they entertained. Mom used her voice to entertain, but she used her voice to not only entertain, but to engage with her children in that entertainment. I couldn't remember the colors of the dresses completely, and I don't remember the songs that they sang. But what I do remember is just how proud I was when I sat there and I listened to those three sing. I remember how proud I was that Mother was the leader of that group. And she sang, they followed. She led, they followed. And we turned Joy's mic down kind of low. Oh, but boy, they sounded so great. I'm sorry, that's not nice. Forgive me. But sometimes she was a singer, but sometimes she was an entertainer. But she loved music, as Jeff pointed out earlier. Sometimes she was, and you have to watch me on this one, sometimes she was an athlete. Those homecoming celebrations you had, we had community games. A lot of times she and Dad would be the ones organizing those. And there's a lot of different things. You know, you had watermelon eating contests, and you talk about a champ would eat watermelon eater. But sometimes you'd have three-legged races, you know, the egg toss and that kind of stuff. But you also had trailer backing. Yes, it's a rural area. And they had men's and women's division trailer bagging. And one year, again, we can discuss the details later. The way I remember it, there was only one woman who entered, Ann Blanton. So when it was time, after the men had run the course, and then it was time for the women's contest, she was the only contestant. She was told, well, you don't have to do it, you've already won. No, I'll do it. Not only did she do it, she beat the men's time. She competed, and I couldn't venture to guess how many years in a row that she participated in the rolling pin throwing contest. You know the rolling pin, rolling pin. I don't know why you throw them. But every year, well, I'll put it this way. If what you do for entertainment is to see how far your women folk can throw a rolling pin, you might be a redneck. She entered the contest, got second place every year. And she hated it. Because first place every year was also the same woman and not her. But she was an athlete. Sometimes she was stubborn. I wrote in a intentional pause to let your shock and amazement wear off. I have a story, and many more that I could choose from to highlight the fact that sometimes she was stubborn. I am choosing in the interest of time and the slight possibility that she could haunt us, that I'm not going to share that particular story. But suffice it to say, she sometimes also could change her mind. Sometimes my mother was a hostess. She completely planned, prepared, served the rehearsal dinner for my wife and I when we got married. I don't remember how many people there are, but the wedding, that list kind of grows, and hosted them all. All 4 of her kids got married right there in Detroit. 3 of us in the same church. 1 of us kind of across 2 streets and down the street, but still all right there. And I don't know, y'all can correct me later. I think she did rehearsal dinner for all 4 of those weddings. Is that not Ken?
It's ours.
I said you could correct me later.
Sorry.
Well, she did those things willingly and happily. I don't know. Maybe if she let Barbara do it, she was unhappy about that. I don't know. The point is, she did those things. Each of the years that each of her children became a senior, they, including my dad, would host an evening where they would bring the entire senior class to their house. They would cook a meal for them and participate in, whatever kind of games or well, in church we call it fellowship. They had fellowship. I didn't have one of those. It was my fault, though, not theirs. They were willing to do it. I guess I didn't like my classmates that much. I don't know. I don't remember why. Those homecoming events and parties, she was oftentimes involved in planning those. And she was a central figure along with my dad in organizing those games and everything. She was a hostess at Christmas, and Jeff mentioned this. I will tell you, in agreement with him, they are legendary, in my mind at least. But in addition to just the Christmas night thing, which included all the food you could possibly want, impeccably prepared and hosted by her, every Christmas, she loved making candy. She would make candy in enormous quantities, put them in containers, and she would mail those or hand deliver, if possible, to each of her children many times. And I will tell you you guys, you might not know this, but you've eaten some of her candy plenty of times because there was too much for us to eat ourselves. She loved doing that. And because she loved Christmas and she loved the activity so much. She also, one time when I was working at a children's home over in Hugo, we had 4 children, all boys, whose parents did not want them to come home for Christmas. And I know that's pretty sad, and Mom found out about that. She said, nonsense, they can come to our house for Christmas. Not only did they come to our house, she made them feel welcome. She made them feel wanted. She made them feel special. They bought, Mom and Dad, mostly Mom, bought them each gifts so that they would have things to open under the tree. She was a fantastic hostess. I brought home a girl about mid-December. The girl I brought home already had a child. I brought them home to meet Mom and Dad. I thought this might be the one, you know. I brought them home and I told her, I said, look, if my parents disapprove of you, that'll be the last time I see you. I'll just take you home, that'll be it. So she was very calm and relaxed and everything. Stress-free. She came in for the visit, Mom talked to them. She was gracious towards them. She learned about them. Just a few days later, where they were invited also to come back to her home for Christmas. And she not only bought gifts, but she bought gifts that she paid attention to in those conversations. And anybody who got a gift from her, you know, she listened to what you said. She knew about what you liked and what you did. And when she did something for you, it was personal and it was meaningful. I think Thanksgiving was her favorite. I don't know why. Maybe because it was a week-long event rather than a night. She had several days of planning and then a couple of days of preparation. And then you had everybody that came over. It was inevitable that you'd have the football game out in the yard and she would watch that. There would then be the football game on TV, which she would tolerate. But she just loved Thanksgiving. She was a very good hostess. She helped her mother when it was the original J.R. Pierce Thanksgiving. Then when those families kind of separated and it was, she helped her mom host at her house for Thanksgiving. And then when that family grew and kind of dissipated, she hosted the rest of us. And you didn't have to be a son or daughter. You could be a cousin or another cousin or a second cousin. They were all welcome. They all were made to feel at home. She liked community gatherings, and if there was a sports banquet where they needed desserts, she was there. She had those things done. Potlucks, I dare say, and this is somewhat speculative on my part, but I doubt seriously there is anybody here, other than maybe my 2 friends here that never met my mom, but thank you for being here, for your support of me. I dare say there's nobody here who hasn't eaten something that she has cooked and prepared. There's no one here who has not been a recipient of her hospitality. I could go on about sometimes, and I'm not going to, but sometimes she was a medic, sometimes she was a comedian, sometimes she was a leader, sometimes she was an organizer. You know, I have stories for every one of these categories and things. I want you to talk about those things. I want you to remember those things. I want you to take comfort in a focus on her. But interwoven in all of these roles, she sometimes fulfilled, or the qualities that she sometimes demonstrated, are foundational virtues that did not waver. They are enduring attributes that shaped and maintained her character traits, regardless of the role she played in other people's lives. For instance, she was always faithful. The greatest testament to this, I think, is her relationship with Wayne. Yes, I feel I must mention him alongside her, as they were a team, devoted to one another, separable only by death. They were married for 38 years, but knew each other longer than that. For most of the things I mentioned earlier in the sometimes section, he was always by her side, her partner in crime, so to speak. She was faithful to him, to her marriage, to her vows. It's been nearly 28 years since he passed away. Yet she has remained faithful to that relationship, the memory of it, and her identity in it. She has continued to honor him, his fatherhood, and his name. Beyond marriage, though, she's always been faithful to help others, especially family. I think Jeff mentioned the nursing home for so many years. And I want you to know, she would get up and leave. She had to be at work at 6 in the morning. She'd get off at 3:30, something like that. She wouldn't get home till 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock at night, and do that every day. She did for years. Anyway, she often was helpful to others and faithful, even when it had to be self-sacrificial. Basically, if she told you she would, she did. More often than not, she said she would and was faithful to follow through. It wasn't something she decided to do. It was just woven into the fabric of her personality. She always loved. I do not mean to suggest that my mother was perfect. She could get angry. She did make mistakes. But her love for others always won the day in her actions and the treatment of others. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. You may remember that from 1 Corinthians 13, verse 7. I've seen her endure hardship and heartbreak. But those things do not diminish her love of people or her love of God. And it could not steal her hope. Love was always her guiding force, and it permeated all areas of her life. She always did what she felt was right. It is possible that one might disagree with her about what was or not the right thing to do, but she always did what she thought was right. To that end, she always and notoriously tried to see the point of view of everyone involved. She would insist and do what she thought was right, even if it was not what was best for her. Her sense of right and wrong was taught through her example. She modeled compassion and understanding because it is the right thing to do. And finally, she was always present. Not that she was always where you would want her to be, but in the sense that when she was with you, she was present in that moment with you. When you were with her, her mind wasn't wandering off to someone or somewhere else. She was intellectually and emotionally available. You received her attention, and she was vested in the moment. I remember the last visit that I had with her in the nursing home. She was fully engaged, as always, but she was very confused. We talked for an hour or so, and nothing said made sense. She spoke of things that were not possible. The whole conversation didn't even seem real. I tried to comfort her. I tried to agree with her. I tried to move the conversation along, but the only thing I could do was to grieve because I saw her slip away. We find ourselves in the same place today. It doesn't seem possible in many ways. It doesn't seem real. For the first time in my life, we can't have a conversation with her, and we are grieving. But at the end of that last visit in the nursing home that I mentioned, as I was grieving, it came time to tell her bye. She seemed weak and tired. I kissed her, and I said, I love you. Reflexively, she lifted her head, got a joyful gleam in her eye. She looked directly into mine, and with a vintage, very maternal smile said, I love you too, Keith. She was there, fully engaged, and 100% present. What while it's difficult on the surface, sharing this particular memory, it does give me comfort. It reminds me that there exists a bond that cannot be broken by the ravages of time or even death, and that she remains forever connected, forever present. I firmly hope that each of you have a story or two or 100 that will give you the same relief. I hope you share your stories and memories. I hope you help one another through our shared grief. I hope you are blessed, as I am, with memories that remind you of her, that permeate you with love and assure you that she is always near. Let's pray. Father, it is with the deepest of gratitude that we bow before you simply to say thank you. Thank you for the life. Thank you for the impact this life has had on each of us. Help us to cope. Help us to do so by sharing with one another. Allow us to laugh. Allow us to cry. But whatever it is that we do, send your Spirit, Lord. Send him now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Jesus is mine. Oh, this is my star.
So much for your attendance today. The family will have a private burial at Detroit Cemetery, and the rest of us are dismissed. Thank you.